What's up, guys? It is Tuesday, June 19th. It is 11:50 a.m. I've just rolled out of bed and I'm here to talk about MIDI. Okay, so this is the theory part of the lesson, and I just want to go over basically chord construction right now. So a chord is any two notes or more played at the same time. And I'm just going to go over major and minor triads, which are the most common chords that you'll hear. A major triad tends to have a more happy sound. I mean, happy and sad are often used to describe major and minor triads, but honestly, I just kind of think they sound different. So a major, we'll stick with the key of C. A C major triad is C, E, G. And remember last time we went over half steps and whole steps. You can look at it as as 4 half steps for the first interval, C to E. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then for the next interval, E to G is 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. Now, 4 half steps is called a major third, and 3 half steps is called a minor third. So a major chord consists of a major third plus a minor third. So the major third is C to E, and the minor third is E to G. Okay, so again, that's a major chord, and that is a major third plus a minor third stacked on top of each other. Let's also go over a minor chord. We're going to do A minor, and that's kind of the inverse. It's a minor third, so 3 half steps, with a major third on top of it, 4 half steps. So a minor third from A, try and think about what that would be. 3 half steps from A, not including A to C. That's a minor third, and you can stack a major third on top of that. From C, 4 half steps will be E. So C to E is a major third. So the entire chord is going to be A, C, E. Okay, so once again, the major triad is, and the minor triad is, and I'm just using A minor because that is the relative minor in the key of C. You can see for major scale, which is what we're going to be talking about for the foreseeable future, the 1 is major, the tonic, the 2 is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major, 5 is major, 6 is minor, 7 is diminished. So basically what this means is that in the key of C, the 1 is C, 2 is D, etc. So in the key of C, the 1 is going to be a major chord, C major. The 2, D, is going to be D minor. 3, E, is going to be E minor, etc. That's all the theory we're going to do in this lesson. I realize that's not a lot, but feel free to do more reading on chords if you're interested. And we're going to go over chords more in depth next time, probably. Alright? This is the, again, the default Ableton session. And what I want to talk about today is the difference between an audio track and a MIDI track, which I mentioned last time, but I kind of just brushed it off. I want to talk about what MIDI is exactly, and I want to talk about how to set up your MIDI controller. So, MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, and you can kind of think of it as like sheet music that Ableton will play back to you, or as one of those wind-up piano boxes, or wind-up music boxes. It's kind of the same concept. But to demonstrate, I'm just going to drop on this grand piano onto this MIDI track and insert a clip. Like I said last time, if you press play, the playhead will loop over and over again and play any notes that it crosses. This is really a really good demonstration of what MIDI is and how it works, but I'm just going to go ahead and sequence some more notes to make sure you understand the concept. Okay, so you'll notice that this isn't a waveform and this isn't final. We can move notes around as much as we want, and Ableton will play to accommodate for the changes that we've made. So MIDI's great because you can always edit anything and Ableton will play them back in real time. But just to show you the difference between an audio track and a MIDI track, I'm going to duplicate this MIDI track, right-click, freeze it, right-click again, and flatten it, and you'll see that it now has a waveform and it has turned into an audio track. But if I play them both at the same time, they're the exact same. But on this audio track, I can't move any notes around. I don't really have much flexibility as to changing the notes and editing the part. Whereas on this MIDI track, I can still go ahead and change the location of notes, change the duration, and do basically anything I want to still. So, you know, a MIDI track will provide a lot more flexibility than an audio track. And of course, if you're recording, you know, vocals or basically any real instrument, that's going to be an audio track, so you're not going to be able to move the notes around really. But it's a trade-off because a lot of people think that real instruments sound better. They have more character, and honestly, I tend to agree with that. But as to why you would freeze and flatten a MIDI track into an audio track, there are a couple of reasons actually. I'm going to solo this and play this. For one, I mean, it's great just to get glitchy sounds. I mean, you can time stretch the audio, and in no time you have a lot of crazy things happening. And personally, I love reversing audio. So, I mean, there's a couple of reasons that you would want a MIDI track to turn into an audio track, because you can't really do that kind of thing over here. Oh, you can also do some transposing that will time stretch the audio, so it'll sound kind of, there'll be a lot of audio artifacts and stuff like that. Honestly, I love experimenting with audio tracks, and I usually freeze and flatten pretty early in the process. But we're not here to talk about audio, we are here to talk about MIDI. So hopefully by now you understand the difference between a MIDI track and an audio track, and what a MIDI track actually is. Perhaps one of the most important parts of MIDI is the MIDI controller. My MIDI keyboard right now is in my car, but I happen to have my MPD32 right here. So I'm just going to use this instead. A lot of you guys have been asking me what MIDI keyboard to get, and I've been trying to reply with my best answer. So if you still have that question, feel free to hit me up. Anyway, the first thing that you're going to want to do to set up your controller is to just plug it into the USB port. And then once that's done, if it's bus powered, then you're good. Otherwise, plug it into the wall. And then just press Command-Comma to get to preferences, or on PC, I don't really know. But anyway, go to the MIDI tab and select your control surface. Now basically, the way it's going to work is, if your control surface is in here, you should probably go ahead and pick it, and then make sure the input and output is also set to that. And down here, you're probably not going to have IAC driver. I mean, if you do, that's fine. But don't worry about that. Just worry about the however many inputs and outputs that are the name of your controller. So you can see I have 3 inputs and 2 outputs, and basically the way I have it set up is I have tracking on for all of them, sync off for all of them, and remote on for all of them. I kind of like this setup, and it doesn't, I mean, I'm not really going to go into the details of this right now because it's a little bit advanced, but honestly, if you just copy this, then it's probably going to be your best bet, at least for now. It's not going to matter that much either way though. Okay, so now that our MIDI controller is set up, I'm going to go ahead and drop in probably an 808 kit. Okay, and so you'll notice that right now this red button is lit up on the 808 kit, which means that the track is armed. So if I play any notes on my MIDI keyboard or my MIDI controller, it will play notes on this track, not the piano. So yeah, if I go over here and play and arm the piano track, all of a sudden it plays piano notes. Great. You can arm both at the same time. There's not really a reason to do that with drums and keyboard, but if you have two synths, for instance, you might want to blend the sounds. But anyway, you can hold command and arm two tracks at once. Yeah, like I said, you don't really want to do that with drums and a keyboard. Let's see. So let's talk about, now that your MIDI keyboard is set up, let's talk about actually recording with it. I'm going to go with drums for right now. I'm going to mute this. Before we actually record, I have to go over a few parameters that I want to set before we start recording. One, just turn on the metronome, because otherwise you're not going to know where you are in the song. The next thing to do is right-click on the metronome and set a count in. I like 1 bar. You can do whatever you want. But what this is going to do is before it's going to give you 1 bar of click before it starts actually recording. And you can tell that because the clip doesn't appear until 1 bar, and also the metronome has a -1. See that? And then the clip will appear. And so I'm just going to record a drum part, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm going to shorten this. Okay, and you'll notice that my timing is a little bit off. And so you could go ahead and move every note onto the grid like this, or you could quantize. And what quantizing does is it adjusts every note right to the grid. There are a couple ways to do this. You can select just the notes you want and right-click quantize, or you could select all the notes and then Command U is a shortcut for quantize, by the way. So Command U will. So you can tell that if you do that, sometimes it might not end up exactly perfectly. But that's pretty close. I just need to move these, and that's what I wanted. So quantizing will move notes exactly onto the grid, and you want to do that sometimes, but if you're trying to go for a more human feel, you probably won't really want to quantize because it'll sound like it's right on the grid and it'll sound pretty robotic. There are humanizing plugins that will move notes a little bit off the grid for you, and you can do that manually if you want. Just turn the grid totally off, and then, zoom in a little bit, and then just move notes slightly left and right. And if I went ahead and did that for the whole loop, hopefully it would end up sounding a little bit less robotic. And that just takes a little bit of tinkering. And the other thing to go over is quantize settings. First of all, I never ever take it off of current grid, but if you wanted it for some reason to always quantize the 16th notes, regardless of what your grid is, if your grid is set to quarter notes and you still want it to quantize the 16th notes, you can do that. But honestly, I've never felt the need to take it off of current grid. The other thing I did is select end. I think by default it's not selected, but if you select end, it'll also quantize the end of the note to the end of whatever the current grid is, and I just prefer that. I think it makes things cleaner, and if it's like a synth part, you want the end of the note to cut off on time as well. So that's the basics of quantizing. And I think we've gone over all the basics of MIDI that I want to right now. We went over what MIDI is, the difference between an audio track and a MIDI track, setting up your MIDI controller, recording with your MIDI controller, and quantizing your MIDI notes. So I hope that helps, and I will see you next time.